To help us understand more about the cooperation across Latin America is Alfonso Aguilar, the director of the Hispanic Leadership Coalition. Hi, Alfonso. Trump says Mexico is being run by cartels. Cartels traffic people and deadly fentanyl into the United States. What does this military coalition mean for cartels?
Well, first of all, it's great to have a president who's actually thinking of our backyard, who's thinking of the Caribbean and Latin America for the first time. Look, this cartels and criminal organizations have overrun many countries in Latin America, intensifying drug trafficking, but also sowing terror all over the place. Countries like Peru, Ecuador, that recently were fairly peaceful, now are overrun by crime, and that certainly affects the U.S. as well. So what this coalition means primarily is that the military of the different countries is going to be able to work together to share intelligence. The U.S. could provide training to some of these countries. And also, there could be joint operations. Just recently, a couple of weeks ago, we saw joint operations between the U.S. and the Ecuadorian armed forces to fight cartels in Ecuador. So I think we're going to see more of that. Stephen Miller, the president's advisor, said last week that these cartels are like ISIS and Al-Qaeda in the Middle East, and we have to deal with them in the same way. So this is what this coalition is all about. And it's really a culmination of what the president has been doing for the past year. He declared that the cartels are terrorist organizations. He started going after drug boats in the high seas. He removed Maduro, who was not a legitimate president and was the head of the Cartel de los Soles. The U.S. government collaborated with the government of Mexico to take out El Mencho, the leader of the Nueva Generación Jalisco cartel, one of the top drug trafficker in Mexico. And recently, this joint operation in Ecuador. So now we're expanding that to include our partners, those governments that are committed to going after drug cartels. Now, not everybody was present in this summit. Those governments who were not fighting hard against the cartels were excluded, like the government of Mexico, Brazil, Colombia. But the good thing is that the region is shifting towards the center-right with governments that are committed to bringing peace to the region, and those are great news.
And these kinds of military assets and intelligence assets in the region haven't been seen since the Cold War, so very serious. Now, it sounds like the president wants to make U.S. aid very accessible to these nations. Here's some of what he said. Take a listen.
And some of you are in danger. I mean, you're actually in danger. It's hard to believe. But we're working with you to do whatever we have to do. We'll use missiles. If you want us to use a missile, they're extremely accurate. Boom. Right into the living room. And that's the end of that cartel person.
So, Alfonso, I'd like to get your reaction to that.
Well, the president is changing the dynamic of the war on narco trafficking, on drug trafficking. We're intensifying it. We're treating cartels like terrorists. So it means that is, as the State Department and the Justice Department have defined it, a non-international war against unlawful combatants. So it's the same language that we use to fight against terror. And that means we're going to use all sorts of assets that haven't been used before and share them with our partners. So now the dynamic is going to change dramatically, and we're going to see drug trafficking be disrupted incredibly along with the crime that it generates. Look, the cartels have destabilized the region. They have destabilized our southern border. Now it's under control. And what this means is that we're going to see much desired peace in the region, which creates the environment, as Secretary Rubio was saying, for strengthening economic relations for progress and economic growth in those countries. And it means a safer border for us and the plummeting of narco trafficking into our country.
And at the same time, China is on the administration's radar, and Trump's actions in Venezuela dealt a blow to Chinese oil sourcing, and he's also working to stop the Chinese flow of fentanyl precursors that supply cartels. Here's how the president put it. Let's listen in.
These brutal criminal organizations pose an unacceptable threat to national security, and they provide a dangerous gateway for foreign adversaries in our region. And we don't want them near our country either. We don't want them to come in. They're cancer, you know. They're cancer, and we don't want it spreading.
How much is the Chinese Communist Party to blame for the problems plaguing the Americas?
Oh, incredibly. They've infiltrated the region. That's why the president is reestablishing the Monroe Doctrine, which means that we don't want any geopolitical adversary interfering in the region. For example, in Mexico, they provide the raw material for fentanyl that's fabricated in Mexico. So we want them out. And I think we should strengthen relations with the countries of the region, not China. So this is certainly part of what we're trying to achieve with this forward-looking coalition.
Can the United States, with a bigger presence in these Latin American countries, displace that Chinese influence for the better?
Oh, absolutely. We're going to expand our sphere of influence. And that means also that I think those countries are going to move away from socialism, from authoritarian governments like in Venezuela and Nicaragua and Cuba, and move towards democracy and stability. Look at Cuba. Cuba is on its knees. By taking out Venezuela, Maduro, we took out the #1 supplier of oil to Cuba. So Cuba now has no access to oil. So they're now starting to negotiate with us. Imagine that, a region without Maduro and without a communist Cuba. That's an incredible achievement, and it opens the door for true stability and a move towards democracy in the region. And that's all because of President Trump's incredible leadership.
What's good for the goose is good for the gander, as they say. Now, do you see the President's Shield of Americas giving people hope, especially those impacted by cartel violence and drug trafficking?
Oh, absolutely. First and foremost, here in the United States, this is an America First policy. It's about ensuring that drug trafficking into the country plummets. If we disrupt drug trafficking, we're going to see less drugs entering the country. We've already seen with fentanyl a drop of 56%. That's remarkable in 1 year. That means less deaths in the United States. But it also means a safer hemisphere, because as I've said, these countries have been overrun by crime. And I cannot exaggerate. You take a country like Ecuador, 10, 15 years ago, it was a very, very safe country. Now it's overrun by crime. Part of it was Venezuela, unleashing criminal organizations like Tren de Aragua, that enter those countries and organize all sorts of criminal activity. And the Biden administration opened the door. By opening the doors of the border, they allowed a lot of those criminal elements to enter the country and operate in the United States. We knew that Tren de Aragua was operating in at least 18 states and creating all sorts of havoc.
Alfonso Aguilar, thanks for coming on and bringing us that insight.
Thank you for having me.